Ahoy hoy everybody, this is Corey. Hello. Today's video is a little different, but it's something that I've actually been wanting to do for a little while, and I just kind of have the right impetus to do it today. A day or two ago, my friend Firelight, who's got a great new book coming out, Dabbler's Guide to Witchcraft, which you should be eagerly adding to your reading pile, particularly if you have somebody who's a new witch in your life. I think it's a good book for folks who are just kind of coming into this path. Not a paid advertisement, just a good friend and a book that I think has a lot of merit. But they posted a tweet which I thought was really, really interesting. It said, "OMG, could you all imagine if I suddenly was just like, hey, here's all my spells and stuff from my Book of Shadows. Like if I just went full witch on y'all out of the blue." Which they didn't necessarily do, but I think it's such a funny concept, this idea that we sort of keep it secret, keep it safe when it comes to our spell books. I'm going to kind of throw that out today. I want to actually show you what is in what I consider essentially my spell book, which is a notebook. It's just a notebook full of materials and spells and things like that. So I'm going to give you kind of a quick and dirty tour. I'm not going to show you everything because frankly, that would actually be a little bit boring. That's the thing that we kind of discover with some of this stuff, is that some of the spell work that's in here is not particularly exciting. Additionally, you'll find pretty quickly that some of this stuff is stuff that I've talked about a lot over the years. It's material that I've shared through the podcast, the blog, through videos like this, through the book as well. But one of the reasons I want to do this is I also want to kind of hit on a concept that's in the book, which is this idea of the commonplace book. A commonplace book, if you've read the New World Witchery book, you know that is basically a term for a catch-all notebook that kind of contains all of your sort of daily usable information. So you might keep measurement conversions and tables in there. You might have recipes for foods that you cook frequently or that you cook on a specific schedule and you need to be able to remember. You'll see that's actually something that's in mine. You might keep seasonal charts for planting and growing things. You might also keep magical information, magical spells, healing charms and things like that, herbal remedies, things like that. All of that could be in a commonplace book. We've had a lot of people who have left behind these kind of commonplace books, these notebooks, things like that. One of my favorite books to recommend to people interested in learning about kind of early European American folk traditions, healing and things like that, and also kind of daily life, is a book called The Diary of Martha Ballard, which was edited by Harvard professor Frances Lee Utley. It's basically her commonplace book that contains all of her notes from when she was doing midwifery around New England, and treating all of these different, ailments and things like that kind of came along with midwifery. But then she'd also record things like family affairs and family drama that were really relevant to her or to the people around her, things that she thought, were worth noting in her community. So her commonplace book is a wonderful resource. And so it's one of those things where I think a lot of people don't, they want... we all want the Practical Magic Book of Shadows, the big 3-part one that sort of unfolds in a lot of different ways and has all these kind of things really artistically designed. It's important to remember that is a Hollywood designed book. It is designed to be very aesthetically pleasing. There's nothing wrong with wanting that. There's nothing wrong with having something like that as well. I think that's all very well and good. But one of the things that I think we can lose in that is that these are supposed to be practical books. The spell books are supposed to be practical working notebooks for a lot of us, to be able to do our magic and to have reference so that we can kind of come back to them as we need to, and be able to repeat the magic that has been useful to us. And I will say, sometimes what happens in these notebooks is we put something down that we think is going to be incredibly useful, and then we never use it again. And so one of my kind of things that I do, and you'll see this as I kind of crack this open, is a lot of stuff will wind up being sort of inserted. You can see there's a lot of little papers and things that get inserted into the book. And then once I've found that they're useful enough to commit to kind of a more permanent place within the book, I'll draft out a page that includes them. I'm not necessarily trying to make it incredibly aesthetically pleasing. You'll see I have some very janky drawings in here, but trying to find stuff that is going to need to be transcribed. But that being said, sometimes I put stuff in here that I only use very, very rarely, but I thought was really useful at the time, and that's okay. I've taken a couple of things out of here from time to time as well if I found that they were it's not even that they're not useful, but something that I'm actively not interested in anymore. I might pull that out of the book as well. But generally speaking, this is my working notebook. This is my working magical notebook. And so I'm going to share it with you all and just kind of see what you think. So what I'll do is I'll kind of show you the section that I'm talking about with each of these, and talk just briefly about kind of each little section of this. I will start with kind of what notebook it is. It is, if you've ever seen these are Moleskine notebooks, and that's backwards for you, but Moleskine notebooks. I like Moleskines because I'm a very kind of writerly sort of person. They also have this little band that lets you keep things shut, and crucially, they have a little pocket at the back where you can kind of stuff stuff in, which I'll show you as we get to there. They're really good for kind of keeping all these notes. Now, of course, I've significantly abused my privileges with the pocket, and now I have tons of stuff in here. But so it goes. So you open it up. I actually have always kind of left the first few pages, I'll say blank. They don't have anything on them. There is something that I intend to go there. But that is not something that's one of the few things I probably would not directly share in a video. If you've got my book and you've kind of worked through it, you probably have a sense of the contract that goes along with witchcraft in general and things like that that I write about there, and that's basically what would go in that space. So at any rate, kind of the first charm that you get to is this. It's called the Blood Verse. This is a fairly well-known healing charm. It's Ezekiel 16:6. And when I passed by thee and saw thee polluted in thy blood, I said it to thee while thou wast in thy blood, live. Yea, I said unto thee while thou wast in thy blood, live. And I probably shouldn't go around repeating it willy-nilly, not to diminish its power or anything, but it's been used long enough that I feel like I'm not in any real danger of this. And then there's a whole process and procedural that kind of goes with how you actively use that. But it's useful for staunching small wounds and things like that, slowing the flow of blood in a wound, keeping someone alive if they're bleeding, something like that. No, I'm not advocating using that in place of medical attention at all. In fact, it shouldn't be used in place of medical attention. But I have seen it used in a couple of situations where I was surprised how quickly the wound sort of stopped bleeding actively, and in one case even kind of started to close up. That was very, very surprising. And so it's something that I think is really, really valuable to at least know. I've used it a few times myself, never with the level of efficacy that I've seen kind of more professional brokers or power doctors use that kind of spell before, but it does work. So I'm always very impressed. Following up on that, you can see I've got my little St. Anthony page, and I've even got my little St. Anthony card in there. St. Anthony's one of my patron saints that I work with quite a lot. I grew up with him using this charm, this Tony, look around, help me find what can't be found, and I use that all the time to look for lost objects, and that could be anything from lost car keys to my child saying they've misplaced something that they're looking for, and I'll kind of repeat this and then start looking for this. And so I break down that charm. I have on that page with the prayer card, I have a little variation of that prayer as well. It's a little more formal. It's St. Anthony, please come down. Something's lost that must be found. Which I was actually just talking to Vinny Higginbottom yesterday on a book chat for the Witch With Me Books Club, and they shared with me that that's something that was the version that they grew up with. So it's just a variation. Find that all the time in folklore. And so, I've got that. There's another little spell in here that's all about how to draw a lost object back to you. Probably recognize this one. This is the Satyr Square. That's a protective charm. Just something that you can write on a surface. You can put it onto a piece of paper, fold it up, and put it into a door lintel or something like that. You can inscribe it using oil or water onto a surface for sort of a temporary protective charm. But the idea is that you have this little square of text, and it will protect you. Next thing is this Essene Blessing Walk. This is something I learned while studying Essene. The Essenes are a sort of not heretical, but sort of offshoot sect of early Christianity, and they had some very interesting, very kind of woo belief systems. But I dig some of what they were getting into, and so this is something I've actually used when I need to amp myself up. To be sort of a conduit for blessing to other people. So if I feel like, one of the things I kind of feel like is if I am doing things that are blessing and good to others, that also helps me to generate some of that in my own life too. And at the very least, I wind up not feeling as unblessed as I might be feeling. So it's something I do use quite a lot. I've got a page on shadow magic. That's something I actually pulled from a dream, where I dreamed the technique, and then have later found that it's actually a technique that has been used in a couple of other traditions as well. So it was not something I had read before that I knew of, but there it was. I'm going to skip a few pages. They're not, just because, again, otherwise it's going to get really, really boring to go through every single page of this. But I, want to share a few things. One of my favorite tools, red string. You can see there's even a little piece of red string coming out of the pages here. I've got, red string just kind of hanging out with me virtually everywhere. So red string, I talk about a couple of different charms that you can do with red string, including one that I've used a lot, which is a little headache management charm, where you tie a red string with a certain number of knots around your wrist. Occasionally I'll have little herbal notes as well. This is one of my favorites. This is rue. I like rue quite a lot. That's from a rue that I grew in a garden many, many years ago. I've got some notes on the properties of that. I've got notes on a little amulet charm called Guardian Cross, Rowan Cross. This is actually a Rowan Cross that was gifted to me by a very dear friend. And I've got a couple of these. This is kind of an authentic traditional version of that that's protective. But then I've also got some that are ones that I've made. They look a lot worse. They look a lot less put together than that one does. And again, like I said, not every drawing is art, right? This is my horrible approximation of cinnamon when I was trying to write a little bit about cinnamon. This is another one, which is a technique I learned called the witch's handshake, which has to do with how you assert dominance, sort of magical dominance over someone. When you're shaking their hand, you can do this. Now we're living in an era of post handshakes, so I don't know how well that will fly going forward. But I thought that was an interesting thing to sort of include. And of course, like I said, not every drawing is pure art. Got more herbs and stuff in here. I've got rosemary. I've got peppermint, things like that. I get into a whole series of these, which are hex signs. For those who don't know what hex signs are these designs that you find around Pennsylvania, German country, kind of where I'm living right now. You'll see them painted on the sides of barns. They're usually geometric. So depending on who you talk to, they may or may not have magical or spiritual value. Some people see them as what we call apotropaic, which means evil, repelling, or protective in some way. Some people say they're just for nice, which just means that they're just pretty or they're just decorative. Patrick Dunmoyer of the Pennsylvania German Heritage Center has written a very compelling monograph on this, where he basically says, look, in most cases, they're really just a decorative element that incorporates some symbolism that people have associated historically with some of these protective charms, but they are not in and of themselves protective. And I fully believe kind of his research on that is very, very good. But I also know that there are a few exceptions to that. There are people who practice in this path that do use them that way. So I like to include them. These are all from Lee Gandee's book. strange experience, which is chronicling his life as what he called a Hexenmeister, which is a little bit different than sort of the Brauchers or powwows that you find in this area. And his work as a Hexenmeister, it just kind of involved, he would design these kind of amazing hex signs that had these kind of different magical charges that he would intend them to have. And you can see there's some more of them. I'm not going to show you all of them, just because one, there's a lot of them. And two, I think the book is still in copyright. I don't want to show everything from the book because of that. But you can see, I messed up on a few of them. They're trying to include them. And, each one has sort of difference. So, for example, this one is tulips, which are a symbol of faith. So you would put it up if you needed to reinforce faith within your household or within your life, right? I break into an entire system of sigil writing based on playing cards, which is something that I developed after I read with playing cards, and I wrote a whole little mini book about that as well. And so I basically turned all of that into a sigil system after reading Laura Tempest Zekroff's Sigil Witchery, which is absolutely stellar. If you don't have it, it's really, really good, and it was very inspiring to me to make the sigil system. And then that has been a lot of how I kind of work sigils out. You can even see, I'm just going to kind of show you a little bit right there. It's a sigil that I've used in job searches and things like that, based on this kind of cartomantic system that I was working with, and then adapting some sigils in there too. I've got my little Spirit Ancestral Call that I use when I'm preparing to read cards in there. I've got, again, more red thread. Look at that. It's a bookbinding charm with one of my active book bindings to bring a particular book back to me. So if you have my book, turn it. I've got lots of little stuff that I've sort of collected over the years that I think is interesting. Something I ordered a few things from, I think it was Lucky Mojo Company at one point, and they send these little neat protective charms based on a couple of different spiritual traditions. I believe this is a Hindu spiritual tradition. There might be Nepalese actually. And so I tucked those in there. I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to bounce just so, again, this doesn't wind up being incredibly long, to get to this kind of back section where all of the sort of piled up notes are as well. One of the things I've got in here is a little packet of information that I did from a recent workshop. I took Mademoiselle Vendredi's Scintillating Servitors workshop, which is really, really good. Taught me a lot about kind of servitor work that I hadn't really thought about. And she walks you through everything from kind of what are they to how do you create one, how do you fill out a contract for one. So this is actually a little packet of that information. One thing I wanted to share here, like I said, this is a commonplace book, so it's not just magical stuff. This is a note, a copy of a note that I wrote to myself in my family cookbook. We have this cookbook that I inherited from my mother, and so I wanted to make sure I kept some of that. This is a note that says, "Dear future Corey, as you read this with your perfect bionic eyes, please remember the following ideas for holiday baking." And then I list some of the cookies and treats that I make at holidays that are some of the most popular. So, for example, Buckeyes, brown sugar cookies, snickerdoodles, orange chocolate ganache truffles. So those are some of the ones. And I have some notes about some of the best things, because I tend to give those as holiday gifts. And then on the inside of that, I have, and if I get a little weepy here, please forgive me. It just always happens when I deal with my mom's handwriting. I have some recipe cards that were written in her hand that I made photocopies of. Those are holiday cookies and things like that. Why are they in my commonplace book? One, it's something that if one of my kids ever inherited this, or if somebody else inherited this, I would want them to have access to some of those recipes. I want those recipes carried on. Those Christmas cookies mean a lot to me. And then also this carries a little bit of my personality in there. Christmas cookies are a big part of how I celebrate during that part of the season, so I want them there. It doesn't necessarily, there's no particular magical meaning to that. They're just there. I've got this big old bundle of pages that I've collected from various almanacs over the years. This has just a couple of different pieces of folklore that I think are really interesting. So this is a headache remedies, wrapping the skin of a rattlesnake around your head. And they have using Treffin to drill a small hole in your skull to release demons. Obviously, don't do that. And they also have some additional headache remedies, things like drinking tart cherry juice, soaking your feet in hot water for 15 minutes, and then putting on socks and lying down, help improve the circulation, get that away from your head. So I've got, that in there. I've got curious customs as well, things like that. Somewhere in here I have a copy of the Astrological Man that I use. I have this whole thing. I don't generally use circles anymore. Like I said, sometimes stuff winds up in here that's been here for years, that I used to use and I don't use anymore, but I still find interesting, or that I might still use. Again, playing cards are kind of one of my go-to tools, so I use them a lot. So I have a whole thing here that is all about how to cast a circle using playing cards, and I kind of give a whole diagram of how that works, and how I would cast those, how I would set that up, and specifically which cards work as sort of which watchtowers or guardian points. I work with the cards, and in doing that, I also work with the 4 winds as they are named in Ovid's Metamorphoses. So like Boreas, Zephyrus, Notice. So the different winds that we have, kind of representing the different directions, and I sort of work with those and the playing cards. I'm a Gemini, so it makes sense that I'm, air and something that's, on paper with cards, and, a game as well. It all kind of works for me. So yeah, I have that. I don't use that method really all that much anymore, but it is something that I think is important to hold on to, because it was a part of my practice at one point in time, and I still would use it if I ever needed to kind of hold court with those particular entities, or with entities that I feel that those give me access to. I would absolutely use that technique again. It was effective. It just was not. It's not something I feel like I have to do all the time. Like I said, I have my little Astrological Man in there. I've got a much better version of the Astrological Man in my book that I really like. So I don't have that handy with me right now. And then, I've got a whole little stack of stuff. Like I said, I sort of destroyed this back pocket by stuffing it full of things. I've got a whole list of witches' proverbs, which were from the defunct site Hedge Witchery, Dawn Jackson's site, which had some really, really neat proverbs that were sort of collected, as well as a whole thing of signs. This is actually the signs, portents, and omens that I've written down from a lot of different folklore sources over the years. So I've got that. It just happens to look like the one that has the witches' proverbs, which is here's the witches' proverbs. I guess I just printed that one out. So you can see sometimes I don't go back into this all that often, but I really like this. This one actually has, if you've read the book, there's the blessing and bane grow on the same stalk. That is right in there. Both blessing and bane grow in the same stalk. I've got handouts from workshops and stuff like that I've attended over the years, that I felt were valuable or contained interesting magical information. I've got some notes from other people, which I won't showcase here, just in case they don't want their information showcased. Just because those are more of those may be a little more personal to them. I have another little sort of protective sigil item in there. I have my old formulary for doing all of my different oils and things like that. That's right here. It's all these kind of notes, and you can see how well used it is. I've got a little mini note for doing a business. It's a business bag right there. So yeah, so all kinds of stuff in there. And like I said, it's just kind of all overstuffed. I've got this little fortune-telling fish I picked up somewhere as well, which curls in your hand to answer your questions and things like that. I just thought that was kind of fun. I've got a copy of a couple of poems that are really, really important to my practice. So I've got Anne Sexton's Her Kind, and I've got Black Spirits, which is a poem that you can find in Shakespeare, which was then, I think it was actually taken from a contemporary of Shakespeare's as well. I've got this fun little placemat that I collected at one point. It just has a lot of different sort of pre-food blessings and things like that. So all of that is the kind of stuff that you find within my commonplace book. It's a mess. It's definitely a hot mess of a book. But I think people can be really afraid to share the stuff like that from their books, or that they expect them to be these really gorgeous, pretty, well designed books. And there's nothing wrong with liking that or wanting that in your life. Like I said, we all want that practical magic book. But I hope that by sharing this, I'm sort of destigmatizing a little bit of that barrier. That being said, I also get that there are a lot of people who are like, no, there's a reason that I keep it secret, right? There's something about secrecy that makes it even more valuable or magical. And there's things in here, obviously, that I sort of bypassed and skipped over because I feel that way about those particular elements. But at the same time, I really think it's useful to share some of this information, let you take a look at my little commonplace book. Hopefully it was useful to you, something that you're interested in. And hopefully, maybe it inspired you to do something like that with your own writing as well, putting together your own little commonplace book to collect your information, sort of a working magician's notebook. It's one of the things I really, really like seeing, or the things that clearly are being actively used to record, to write, to reference things as well. So just wanted to share that with you. I felt a little bit like there was definitely kind of some of that sort of Mustafa and Scar. Is that a challenge energy from Firelight's tweet? And I was like, well, why not? Why not share that? So I've done that. Hopefully it was useful to some of you. Interesting to some of you. I would love to know if any of this seems familiar. Is it any of this stuff that I shared in your commonplace books or magical spell books, magical notebooks as well? Or do you have other ways, other things that you like to keep in your magical notebooks as well, that I may be missing here, that I didn't reference, that you think, oh yeah, maybe have you thought about putting this in there or something like that? I'm always interested in hearing kind of what's in people's spell books, so to speak. So yeah, share that with me in the comments. Don't forget, please let people know about us, share us around as best you can. That always helps to allow me to do more stuff like this. So please do that. You can like and subscribe as well if you are able to. I certainly appreciate that too. So I guess that'll do it for this time. Thank you so much for watching, and be well.